Now, a webinar is very, very simply, it's a web conference. It's where a group of people get together on the internet through their browsers to listen to an expert deliver a training program. Now, the training program is a combination of video and audio. They can see a PowerPoint presentation or your computer screen or whatever you want them to see. And while they're doing that, they can listen to you. And best of all, there's interaction between the two of you. So they're very, very powerful ways for you to present information to pretty much people across the globe. It's a fantastic way of training, a way of teaching people, and a way of providing information. And best of all, it's a very, very popular way of training at the moment. So, in the old days, it used to be just audio. You'd have a teleconference and people would talk. But, with the advances in internet technologies, the better availability of high-speed broadband, now video is so much easier for people on the internet. So, video is typically a part of a webinar. As I said, you would create a PowerPoint presentation, you would go through something on your screen to train them and show them how to do whatever it is you want to do. So it's very, very powerful and popular, and it's very effective. People love having webinars run, people love attending them. It's like attending an offline training course, but sort of in person, but online. People like going to training courses and training programs and learning, but often the cost or the distance is insurmountable for a lot of people. And for you as somebody trying to run that, it's expensive. You have to hire a hall, hire equipment, advertise, get people in, etc, etc, etc. So it's not always particularly easy to do. So a webinar allows you to run a training program almost as if you were there in front of them, but across the internet. So it's very, very powerful, and it's pretty much replacing teleconferences these days. If you remember a year or two ago, the thing was teleconferences, you had to run them, you had to do them, they were very important, it was the in thing. And really now, telephone conferences are sort of almost dying a death because they're not really very popular anymore. People don't like them, people don't use them, they're difficult, they're expensive because, let's face it, if I'm in the UK and the telephone conference is in the USA, I've got to pay for an international rate telephone call, which of course for a lot of people that would really put them off. And if you're in sort of somewhere like, say, India or a sort of a country like that, it may be that the cost of the call is significant, and we're talking a large proportion of your income. So telephone conferences, whilst good if people are in the same geographic area, aren't particularly useful if you are located in different time zones, different countries. Paying for international calls really would put a lot of people off. So webinars have really helped to overcome this because people can do it all online, and they're doing it all through their browser. They're not paying for any calls. They're doing it all through their browser, so it's free with their internet connection, which makes it very popular. Now, having the video so people can see you and you can obviously show them your screen, and having the ability to run polls and take messages and questions from your listeners pretty much as you're working, really is helping to make webinars very, very popular. People love this interactiveness of them, and that really is, to be honest, one of the major benefits is the fact that I, as sort of an attendee, if you like, can go to the webinar and I can ask a question. So there may be the big guru is there and they're running their training program, and I don't understand something, and I say, look, just help me out here, I don't understand this, what do you mean? And then if they will take the question, they may answer it, and there you are, I've had my question answered, which of course is going to do well for me as the attendee, because I'm going to feel well loved by the person who's running it. So this interactiveness makes it very, very helpful. The issue with telephone conferences, of course, is they couldn't be this interactive because you couldn't open up an individual line. You had to open up to everyone, and then you'd have 1,000 people trying to talk at once, which frankly is a nightmare. So webinars have made the whole online training thing so much easier and so much better in many, many ways. So webinars are a fantastic way for you to communicate with your subscribers. It's a great way for you to build a list. You can use webinars to build a list, to sell products, to establish yourself as an authority, to educate people as to why they have to buy from you. All sorts of things like that. So webinars are very, very powerful and very effective. They really, really are. So, I think what you'll find is, as we go through this program is you'll realize how effective and useful a webinar is. Now, I don't want you, before we start, I don't want you sitting there thinking, well, I'm not in the internet marketing niche. How am I going to run a webinar? Doesn't matter what niche you're in. You can be in any niche at all and webinars will work. I might run a 6-week webinar on confidence, for example. I might run a webinar on how to cook. How to make the perfect cake, or the best roast potatoes, or something like that. There's endless possibilities. So please don't sit there throughout this program thinking, how can I do this in internet marketing? Internet marketing is just one of many, many niches. And there's many other niches that you could be applying this to that frankly you'll find a lot more profitable and a lot easier to get involved in. Now, we're probably going to talk mainly about the internet marketing niche because it's a fairly generic one that we're all very familiar with and we're obviously all involved with. So it's probably going to be our example throughout this this program. But do bear in mind that it doesn't matter what niche you are in. You may still run webinars, and webinars will still be very popular and very accepted by people. Remember, if you go into some of the other niches, self-help niche, the making money niche, things like that, they love attending seminars, and the webinar allows them to attend seminars whenever they want. So very, very effective. So let me just talk a little about what you're going to find in this course. Now, we're going to go through quite a lot of information about webinars. By the time we finish, you will know everything you need to know to run a webinar and be ready to go. We're going to talk about the webinar companies. There's lots of companies that will host your webinar for you, but which one do you want to use? What's the different features? What's the options available to you? So we want to discuss that as well so that you have a good understanding of what to look for in a webinar company. The last thing you want to do is to set up your webinar and have a nightmare because of the webinar company. I mean, that's really, really going to ruin it. If you've worked hard to get 1,000 people on there that are all raring to go and ready to listen to you, and then it all falls to pieces because of the webinar company, that's a huge, huge problem. And worst of all, because of the terms of service of the webinar company, there's probably no legal recourse for you, so you couldn't go off and sue them or anything like that, because they'll say, well, we don't guarantee a service or something like that. So their terms of service, which you accept when you sign up, will probably protect them from that. So it's up to you to ensure that you choose the right webinar company, because it will make a big, big difference. And I'm actually going to show you two of the most popular and most well-known webinar companies. They vary a little in price, but I wanted you to see both ends of the market. I want you to see what is available. So we're going to look at two very popular webinar companies. Now, one of the things that people fall down on is how do they structure their presentation? How do you deliver a webinar in such a way that it's useful to people? A lot of people aren't used to talking to audiences, and running a webinar is effectively talking to an audience. So the idea is that if I can help you to run that webinar in a structured and effective manner, it's going to make your life an awful lot easier, because you're going to understand how to run that webinar for maximum effect. So if you have it structured well, it's going to run properly, it's going to sound well, people are going to be impressed, it's going to be professional. If it's badly structured and you're sort of jumping around all over the place, then of course it's not going to make any sense to your readers, your listeners, and it's going to put them off. They're going to be, thinking you're unprofessional, and you find a large number of them will probably leave the webinar. I'm going to talk a little bit about marketing your webinar as well. Now, obviously, one of the first places to look is your own list, but what if you don't have a list? How can you get people into your webinar? We're going to talk about that as well. We're going to talk about the actual presentation of your webinar so that you don't sit there stuttering and going and ah all the time and people really not enjoying whatever it is you're doing. So I want to make sure that you have an idea of how to be confident presenting it, how to deal with the issues that are likely to come up. We're going to talk about when to run webinars as well. Now, obviously there's certain times of the day that will be more effective than others, but you're in a global marketplace, so what do? We're going to talk about that and help you understand it. We're going to talk as well about turning your webinar into a product and how to make a product from webinars. Now, they may sound like the same concepts, but they're actually slightly different, and we're going to cover sort of both of those in this so you really have a good understanding of it. And of course, there's going to be a lot more. We're going to go into a good amount of detail here. I want to share a lot of information with you just to really help you become the best you can and run webinars. Webinars are a very effective and profitable way for you to run your business. They are very good. And what I want you to do by the end of this is to be in a position where you can very easily run your own webinar with no problems at all. So I want you to hold on and get ready as we're going to go through and start teaching you all about running webinars and profiting from them. So let's start talking about the tools that you need in order to run a webinar. Well, I think the first tool pretty much goes without saying. You're going to need a webinar hosting company, quite obviously. Now, you can try and get software and run your own webinar, etc., but frankly, it's so much of a headache, I wouldn't even bother trying. You need high availability coming into your site. You need a lot of technology behind it, which, to be perfectly frank, is too much like hard work. It's much easier for you to rent space from a webinar hosting company. Now, if you were really keen and you were running an awful lot and you wanted to go into the markets, then sure, you can do that, but most people aren't going to. So you're going to have to get a webinar hosting company. We'll talk about those in a little while. Now, next, quite obviously, you are going to need listeners. There's no point you running a webinar if there is nobody at all listening in. You've got to get listeners, and we're going to talk about that more as we go through the program. So, think about that. You are going to have them. Now, what else do you need? Well, you need a good quality microphone. What I strongly recommend is that you get yourself what we call a podcasting kit. Now, it's a microphone that it will sit on your desk, but it's in a base. It's got a base on it so it doesn't get knocked over. Has a cradle in it so that you can bang it a little and it's not going to get tapping noises. And it has a pop filter. If you don't have a pop filter, when you say "puh," you get some funny sounds. So if I say I've got a pop filter here, so if I go pop, you can see that. That's with the pop filter on. If I remove the pop filter, pop, you can see that it sounds very different. Pop and pop. And if I go snake, snake, you can see there is a difference, and it does make a difference. Now, what you can do if you want is, obviously not everyone's going to be able to spend sort of $70 to $100 on a decent microphone, so you may want to use a headset mic. If you are going to use a headset mic, then please practice beforehand and put it in a position where you don't sound like Darth Vader. There's nothing worse than listening to a seminar, a webinar where all you can hear is the host breathing. It's terrible. It really is. It's so off-putting. So you've got to position the microphone right to make sure that when people are listening to it, it's easy for them to listen to it. You don't want them to be sitting there thinking, oh, God, I can't quite make out what he's talking about. I can't hear it properly. So get a good quality microphone. The pop filter, as I said, I feel it's very, very important. It does improve the quality of the sound. It takes away some of the sort of harshness of the voice, particularly sort of P's, S's and other sounds like that. Now, when it comes to positioning the head mic, if you're going to use one, then you sort of want it sort of almost parallel with your nose, basically. I know that may sound a bit counterintuitive, but if you have it right in front of your mouth, you're going to get the panting sounds as you're breathing. You're going to get breathing when you're breathing through your nose. You're going to get all the P's and S's sort of overpronounced, if you like. So position it sort of opposite your nose and listen to it a few times. Record yourself. You've got Windows Media Recorder if you haven't got anything else. Just record yourself speaking, test the position, because when you're delivering this webinar, it's got to be right first time. You cannot sort of say to people halfway through the webinar, hang on a minute, I need to spend some time repositioning my microphone, because people are going to go, all right, bye, and leave. So, you want it from the moment they come in there to sound really, really good, because that is going to help significantly. And of course, what else you need? A reliable high-speed internet connection. Now, you are going to be broadcasting your screen or a PowerPoint presentation in your voice across the internet. So if your internet speed is, your internet drops out every 2 minutes and is highly unreliable, you're going to struggle to run a webinar. So you need to have a high-speed, reliable internet connection that you can rely on. Now, a lot of people, I mean, mine does this, in an evening, it slows down like nobody's business as all the neighbourhood kids come home from school and pile onto the internet to go to YouTube and download illegal MP3s. But, if I ran one in an evening, it'd be a nightmare. But if you run one at the right time of day and you have a good quality internet connection, it'll make a difference. You may want to run a few speed tests at the times that you're planning on running your webinars, just to make sure that they run okay. And of course, I think this is perhaps one of the most important things, and we're going to talk about this in depth in a little while. You've got to have a plan. Without a plan, what are you talking about? You have to know exactly what you're covering, and you have to know the order it's been run in, and your listeners need to know what you're going to talk about as well. They need to understand what you are offering them so that they can know that it's worth signing up for. If you haven't got a plan, how do you know what you're going to talk about to them? How are they going to sit there and go, oh, well, yeah, this sounds really good, if you've just sort of been very vague and sort of said, well, we're going to cover something about this, and maybe we'll do a bit on that, and possibly some other stuff, That's not going to get people signing up. You need definite, defined outcomes from your webinar of exactly what you are going to cover. Now, obviously, don't give away the farm, but tell them enough that they go, oh, yeah, that webinar, I've got to come on to it. It sounds really interesting. And that's going to help you significantly. So, we touched on this just now very briefly, but let's talk about it more in depth now. Let's talk about scheduling your webinar. What time of day do you run it? Well, firstly, it depends on when your target market is. If my target market is people who work nights, then running my webinar at night would be a huge mistake. If my target market is people who work during the day, and I schedule my webinar for, middle of the day, they're not going to attend. People who are at work typically cannot attend a webinar. So you have to think about when the best time of day is to run this webinar. So it depends upon where your target market lives. Now, obviously, if they're in a different time zone to you, you don't want to run it at a time that's convenient to you. If I say, well, I want to run my webinar at 9 o'clock in the morning, but my target market's in, say, the United States, well, 9 o'clock in the morning to me is anywhere between sort of 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. depending on where they are in the USA. Of course, they're not going to stay up to that time of day, are they? So you have to take into consideration where your target market is. For a global market, you may want to run multiple webinars. You may want to run some that are in the evening USA time, some are in the evening sort of Europe time, some that are in the evening Asia time. Yeah, I know, it's not going to be massively convenient for you, because you're going to be running a webinar at, sooner or later, one of the webinars will be in the middle of your night. But if you're committed and you really want to give the best to your listeners and you want to get the most from the webinars, then you'll manage, you'll do it. It's only occasionally that you're going to do something like this. So you have to be flexible and sort of give to your listeners like that, because you can't expect your 1,000 potential listeners in India to all sit up till 4 in the morning just to listen to your webinars. Some of them may, but the majority will not. So you do need to be, shall we say, flexible in when you're going to run your webinars. In most cases, evenings is usually a good time. Somewhere between sort of 7 or 8 p.m. is usually good, because, you know, most people are home from work by sort of, say, 8 p.m. They've had their dinner, they've eaten, they're ready to sit down, and they're ready to do something like this. If they've got children by 8 p.m, yeah, if they're putting kids to bed themselves, it's usually little kids by 8 p.m, they're usually in bed. So parents are typically free. And what you'll find is, you know, that's a good time of day. Now, if you were to say, well, I'm going to run my webinar at, say, 5 p.m, a lot of people are going to be either at work, commuting, feeding their family, or something like that. But it does depend upon what your target market is doing, where they are, and so on. But that's up to you to have that level of understanding of them. You know, you have to make the effort to know who your target market are, what they're doing, and so on. You know, you need to know their availability. And you may, as I said, schedule 2 or 3 or even more webinars at various different times in order to sort of maximize your reach. Now, that's very important if you are trying to maximize your sales. Now, say I'm selling something, I may well say, well, I'm going to run sort of 2 or 3 for, you know, a couple for each time zone, and that way I can maximize the people that attend, and of course then maximize how much I'm going to earn from it. So take into account that majority of people work during the day. Weekends are a bit funny. Now, it's hard to say whether weekends good or not. I know personally, and from a lot of people I know, weekends are just terrible because, you know, kids stay up late, you're often out and about, so weekends don't tend to work as well. Friday nights aren't good. Typically Mondays to Thursdays are good days to schedule your webinar. But, you know, as I said, you have to be prepared to run the webinar at sort of slightly peculiar times. You know, as I said, if I'm in the UK and I want to run a webinar for my USA listeners, and I want it to be at 8 p.m, you know, or say 7 p.m. Eastern time, that works out as 7, what's that, as midnight my time. So, you know, I'd have to sit up from, say, if it's 2 hours, from midnight to 2 a.m. But, you know, you don't mind doing that because it's your business, and, you know, hopefully you get a lot of people listening and make a good amount of sales from it. So, you know, you are going to have to be prepared to do these slightly peculiar hours with running webinars. It's just the way it goes. Now, one thing you can do is to offer a replay service. This is quite a good idea, because again, what happens if I can't attend it? You know, you might have scheduled your webinar for Wednesday night, and I'm really interested in attending, but unfortunately Wednesday nights, well, that's the night that I go I go to Aikido, so I'm out all evening, so I can't attend, and I'm probably not going to want to miss my, you know, weekly scheduled event for a webinar. So, you know, offering a replay service is going to ensure that you get the most listeners, because people will come back on for, you know, 2 or 3 days afterwards and listen in, and people who couldn't make it for other reasons is going to come and listen in. So a replay service is going to help you maximize your listeners and obviously maximize your profit. So when it comes to scheduling your webinar, please think about it very carefully. Make sure that you're not just sitting there going, well, this time's convenient for me, so this is the time everyone's coming to the webinar. Think about your target audience. Think about what they do for a living, where they work, what hours they work, and so on. You know, you have to do something that is convenient for them all. And if you offer the replay service and you sort of maximize your exposure, if you like, then you're obviously going to do a lot better with your webinar. So before we look at some webinar companies and see, you know, what they offer and what they look like, let's just spend 5 minutes and talk about what to look for in a webinar company. Now, obviously, there are a lot of webinar companies out there. There's many different providers, all with different features, different benefits, and so on and so forth. So the question is, well, which one do you choose? And that's part of the answer we're hoping to answer, part of the question we're hoping to answer in this video. So firstly, you've got to know your budget. How much money have you got to spend on running the webinar? Yeah, part of this will determine, which provider you go with, but if you have an idea of how much money you're looking at make, you're confident you can get, say, 1,000 listeners, and you feel that you can make sort of, say, $600 in sales, you don't mind spending sort of a few $100s on the webinar. So you have to understand what to expect to make from the webinar. If you're purely list building, but you know that you're going to make money off them sort of once they become on your list, you'll go, yeah, okay, I don't mind spending money. But if you're sitting there thinking, well, I'm not going to make any money from this at all, what's the point in spending too much money? So you've got to understand your budget. You need to know really what you're aiming to achieve from your webinar, and that's going to help you determine how much money you are going to spend on it all. So, get to grips with your budget first of all, know how much money you've got available to spend. So you need to know as well, do you want to have the session recorded? Are you going to say, well, yeah, I want to record this webinar because I want to, I don't know, maybe you want to say, well, I want to market it later on, use it as a product, have a replay available. In which case, yeah, sure, you're going to have to, you are going to have to get it recorded. So do they offer a record facility? If they do, is it included in the price, or are they going to try and charge you extra for it? You need to know that. What's the reliability of this webinar company? Are they there for the long term? Do they offer good quality? Do they have problems? Go and look at people's reviews. Have other people found it? Have they had issues, or have they found no problems at all with the company, found them very easy to work for? So look for a few reviews of the webinar company, and that is going to help you again to make your decision. How easy is it for the listener to use? Again, unless you've attended a webinar on that company, you can't really answer this question, but you do need to think about how easy it is. Look at a demonstration, see what it looks like. Is it intuitive? Do the people have to download any software? Can they just go to a browser window? What you might find is some people, shall we say, get a little bit upset if they have to download any software. People don't like downloading software, and quite often, I know this sounds ridiculous, but quite often you can find that just the fact that the webinar company insists that they download some software will put a lot of people off. I will admit it often puts me off. I don't like to put the software on my computer, because at the end of the day I don't want yet another piece of software cluttering up my computer and taking up all the space. So a lot of people don't trust it. So quite often, if you can find a webinar company where you don't have to do any of that, it'll be much more effective for you as the person who's hosting it. Now, you need to, as well, one thing that's useful is being able to host polls and take questions. Can you ask questions of people and get them to take a poll? Can you say, well, does everyone understand how to FTP something to a server? If you get back, 90% of them don't know, you want to cover that. But if you get back that only 10% don't know, you may say, right, well, when you go to the replay, I'll put a video up there of it, and you can take some things offline then that you spend time talking. It helps you, if you can run polls, to understand what your listeners know and what they don't know, which obviously is going to help you tailor the training program specifically for them. As I said, the last thing you want is to spend an hour explaining how to FTP and how it all works when 90% of your audience knows, because they're going to be bored senseless. So, it's useful to be able to do that. Same with taking questions. You want to be able to take questions. You want to be able to, have people be able to ask questions. because that helps you understand what they do and don't know, and it helps you understand what they don't understand that you're explaining, because you may think you're explaining something that's crystal clear, but to everyone that's listening, they're scratching their head going, I don't know what he's talking about. What's he talking about? No idea. He's talking gibberish. So, you know, taking questions often helps. Now, whether you answer the questions then and there, or you leave them to the end, that's up to you. One thing that works quite well is keep an eye on the questions, and if the questions are something that is directly relevant and will help understanding of what you're trying to communicate, answer it then and there. If it's one that you look at and think, well, it's a bit off topic, write it down and you can always answer it at the end. So, you know, that's very, very important. Now, here's another important consideration. How easy is it for you to use the webinar company? Is it easy? Is it difficult? Is it an intuitive interface? Is it complex? Does it require you to install software? Yeah, etc., etc., etc. You have to understand how easy or not easy it is to use the webinar company yourself. What's the availability of incoming lines? You know, if you're running a webinar and you're expecting, you know, 4,000 people on it, but the webinar company go, well, actually, you know, we can only really support, you know, 100 people, then it's useless, waste of time. You've got to understand how many people they can support and whether that is sufficient for your needs. You know, if you're planning on a paid webinar where you're only going to have 100 people, you don't need 4,000, a capacity of 4,000. So, you know, again, you've got to understand the size of your webinar, because it's going to influence your budget. But again, the final consideration really is, what's the speed of response to the website? Is the webinar host one of these companies that's so slow, you know, you click on something and it takes ages to update? You know, again, you can get this from other people's experiences, look for reviews and comments and so on. But I think we're going to look at the webinar companies in a moment, but you have to consider all of these points when you're selecting your webinar company. You do not want to have any issues. This webinar has to be delivered really, really professionally in order for you to maximize your earnings. If you are going to struggle with your webinar and you find that you know, the webinar company is causing you problems, that's not going to help you to make any sales or make any profit from it. So, you know, please make sure that you consider these. Now, we are going to show you 2 webinar hosts. There are many, many more. Which one you choose is ultimately up to you. The 2 we're showing you here, I'm not recommending in any way, shape or form, because, you know, there's plenty out there. But what I am showing you is 2 that are very popular and commonly used by internet marketers. So I want you to be aware of them. So let's go over now and look at 2 of these webinar companies, just to show you around a little, show you sort of some of the pricing schemes and give you an idea of pretty much what to expect. Okay, we're going to talk now about this site. It's GoToMeeting. GoToMeeting.com is the company. They provide you the facility to run meetings, webinars and training online. The one we're interested here is the GoToWebinar feature. So one of the big benefits of this company is that they offer you a free 30-day trial, so you can have a go, you can use it and see what it's like. You can have webinars of up to 1,000 people, so that's very, very good. You can set up the webinars very easily, works on a Mac or a PC, and has integrated audio conferencing, so you can save everything as well. So this is fantastic. Let's have a look here at the plans and pricing, just so you can see what they offer for you. So you can see here, go to webinar. They give you a few different options here. If you want up to 100 people, it's $99 a month. Up to 500, it's $400 a month, and up to 1,000, it's $500 a month. You can try it free. So basically, yeah, if you're going to do a one-off, then create a free account and run the webinar. If we click on the try it free, you'll see you can run a webinar with up to 100 people. So that's not too bad at all. But it's a good start, really. Now, one of the benefits of GoToMeeting is it's very, very well known. If we look here at the features, you can see some of the features of this site. So for you as the person who's running it, you can schedule it using a form. So here's sort of the form. People can register, you can brand it, you can set up practice you can have practice sessions beforehand, which is fantastic. Now obviously we will talk about practice sessions and how important they are. You can have email templates as well. For attendees, you can see here it's self-service registration. There's automated reminder emails, and if they use Outlook, obviously it can integrate with the Outlook calendar, which is fantastic. So here's the control panel. This shows you can see it goes down quite a bit there. So you can see sort of what you can see. It tells you you're on air. You can stop showing your screen. You can show your screen. You can use the keyboard and mouse, etc., etc. Here it tells you how long you've got. Tells you how many attendees there are and how many are paying attention. Now this is quite useful. It always freaks people out. It's basically how many have got the window active and how many haven't. You can see the questions that you've got and polls, and again you can look at the audience, you can look at your attendees, you can see their names and see sort of other information about them here. So you can see here one of the features is you can record your webinar. You have a which is obviously great because you can use it for future use. You have a pen and a highlighter, spotlight and arrow tools, which helps you point to things on the screen. You can share your whole desktop. You can change presenters easily. You can see there's a button there. You can transfer keyboard and mouse control, and then you can see again if you go down, you can use the telephone, mic and speakers. And then here you have your polls and you have your questions here. So you can see people asking questions as well, and then you've got sort of chats at the end. You can see it's very, very easy to use. Very easy for them to join your webinar. They have an option to here. You can see it raise their hands to get your attention. They can type in questions, join in polls, or chat down here as well. And then if we just continue down, you can see you can get toll-free audio services if you want, and then afterwards you can get sort of feedback. So you've got options to provide detailed reports on registrations. You can survey people. You can see reports on everything that happened, and again you can see that there's sort of more options there for sort of multi users and organisations. So it's very, very good, really. I think it is. It's very useful. If we click on how it works, again we can sort of have another look at it. But I think it's very, very good feature. And GoToMeeting is one that people really like. It's very popular with internet marketers. You can see here what you do is you schedule your webinar. So you give them a time, date, description, title. Then you invite people to register, so you can fill in sort of forms and invite them from there. You remind them to attend, so you can see here you can send out 3 reminders. So you can set one for a few days, 1 day and an hour, and you can link there to include it in their Outlook calendar. You can prepare for it, so you can look at any of their registration responses. You can practice a few times to get yourself good at it. You can see how many people have registered, and so on and so forth. And then obviously you present your webinar. So they've spent a lot of time. I mean, a big part of GoToWebinar is aimed at corporates and companies, but as internet marketers, it's still very, very useful for us. There you can see our screen. You can choose, people can choose that either to come in via their mics and speakers or telephones. You can see your control panel. You can see what people can see on your screen. Attendees see what you show them, so this is what they see. Then they can raise their hands and submit questions using this little control panel over here. And then of course you can get some polls there and see what, ask people questions and get them to interact with you, which of course is very, very good. Then of course we've got the evaluation, so you can see people can rate the webinar, see what they think of it, and you can see how many people attended, how many surveys, etc, etc. So it's very, very good, and you can have all sorts of reports if you want, and then you can send a follow-up email if you want to. So you can see GoToMeeting.com is actually quite a good site. It really is. It's very interesting, and it has a lot of good features on it. It is a little bit pricey. I mean, most of us are going to want more than 100 people on our webinar. So you're looking at $400 a month, which is quite a lot. I think that's why a lot of internet marketers, and of course I didn't say this at all, is a lot of people, if they're running the occasional webinar, will just sign up for a new free account, run their webinar or two, and then cancel it before they get billed. So that's one way of doing it. But it is a good site. It's got a lot of features. It's very professional, and it's very professional because it is aimed at big companies. So this is aimed at sort of companies using this for their staff. So it's GoToMeeting, as I said, is one of the options available to you. Now, some of you may well have fallen off your chair at the price of GoToMeeting. It's not cheap, is it? $400 a month. And unfortunately for many marketers, particularly smaller marketers, $400 a month is a lot of money and really beyond their reach. So there's another company called dimdim.com. They are another webinar hosting company. So they do similar things to the site we were previously on, GoToMeetings. Now this is their site. You can see some good information here. They hold online meetings, webinars, etc, etc. Now you can see there's 3 levels of membership. You have Pro, Webinar and Business. Now their 1,000-person events, which is this one, is $65 a month. So it's telling you that basically you can go to GoToWebinar and pay $500 a month, or you can go to them and only pay $65 a month. So you can, they do other things as well that like whiteboard and other features. So you can try this for free. So again, it's very, very useful. Here we are. This is the Pro version. So this is a good one to start with. It basically allows you to enjoy meetings and pro features with 50 people. So it's $25 a month. But you can see, you can record your meetings, you can share applications or windows, you can share additional webcams, you can customize your room, you can change what attendees see, you can store files, you can conduct polls. You can see there's some good stuff there. And you can see here the different options. If we go for this one, Dimdim Webinar, we can have up to 1,000 people on there, which is absolutely fantastic. And we can do sort of the group and audience management, which is really what we're after. So it's a very good alternative. You can see they've got a user guide and a quick reference guide there as well. And you can get started and use their free trial here. You can get more info as well. So let's just go and look at there, compare the products, and we'll see some of the differences in them. Again, you can see here that I've got a 1,000 person room. Fantastic. I've got 2 gigs of storage. I can have up to 4 people participating as hosts. Public and private chat. I can make anyone a presenter. I've got audio conferencing, and you can see there's lots and lots of other features. Conduct live polls, that's very important, and we get sort of reports as well, and so on. So it's a very, very useful tool. What I wanted to do was just show you an alternative to GoToMeeting. GoToMeeting is the one that most people think of when they think of running a webinar online, but $400 a month is a lot of money. It really, really is. So, a lot of people aren't going to be willing to pay that. However, $65 a month, that I'm a lot happier with. That means that I can, most of us will be able to afford this. Even if we only stay members for a month or two while we run our webinars, it doesn't really matter. You can cancel your membership afterwards, but it's still significantly cheaper than GoToMeeting. Has pretty much the same features, and they do video tours, and you can sign up for a free trial if you want, and just have a good look and see what it's all like. So this is dimdim.com. As I said, it's an alternative to GoToMeeting, and at the price, you're not going to grumble at the difference in price. You're saving $430 by using this site. So which one you choose is entirely up to you, but they do have the free version with some very basic features that basically will allow you to do sort of small 10 ones. So you could always do some 10 user ones if you wanted to, and then obviously move up to the larger ones. So up to you which one you choose to use. But these are just two of them. There are many more. If you search for webinar host or webinar company or webinar on Google, many more will come up. But these are just two of the more popular ones. And as I said, I wanted to show you two at different ends of the sort of budget range, so that you can really realise that there's plenty of options available to you, and that webinars really aren't outside of your reach. I mean, if I'd just shown you GoToMeetings, you might be thinking, I can never run a webinar. I can't afford $500 a month. Here though, $65 a month plus a free trial. You can't complain at that, can you? So GoToMeeting is the first site, and DimDim is the second. Both of these are very reliable, well-known webinar hosting companies that you could possibly use. Now, when it comes to running your webinar, you have to have a good structure to it. You have to have a logical flow. If you do not have a structure and you're just sort of winging it, you're going to struggle. You're going to struggle to present the information in a way that is easy for your readers to understand. You have to make sure that you have the structure and you take them through from A to B to C to D and so on. If you don't, it's going to be difficult. And the last thing you want is for people to be sitting there scratching their head thinking, well, you missed something, I don't understand this. You want to take them through step by step. What I recommend is that you plan out your program and you print it out. Have it written out or printed out next to you, so that you can tick things off and work through it as you're running your webinar. You don't want to have it on your screen, because if they're looking at your screen, you don't want to have to be sort of switching windows so that people can see what's going on. What I do is, if I was running a webinar, I would list out the main sort of chapters, if you like, that I want to cover, and then sort of the main points within that, and just work my way through it. I could put it on a laptop next to my main computer, or have it printed out. It doesn't matter which, as long as it's there. Now, it's very important that you start and finish on time. People have set aside, the time that you've said for your webinar. So if you, don't start until, you say you're starting at 7:30, but it's 7:45. You're 15 minutes late. You're going to have annoyed a lot of people already. A lot of them are going to say, well, why we bother turning up? You can't even bother to be here. And typically, if you're not there dead on time or even early, people will leave, and you'll get a lot of people leaving. I've gone on to webinars and telephone conferences where you get there on time and it's just saying the conference isn't open yet. You wait 5 minutes. If it hasn't appeared, you go, you know what, not worth it, and you put the phone down and you go and do something else. So you have to start on time. Finishing on time is also quite important. This is why you need your structure. You need to know how long it's going to last, and this is why you can't really be distracted by questions as you're going through. People, if I'm running my webinar in the USA and I've got some gentleman in India listening in, he's hours ahead of me, so it's the middle of his night, so he might want to get a couple of hours sleep before the morning. So by me waffling on a lot longer, I'm irritating people again. So what I tend to do is say, right, well, I'm running my webinar from 7:30 to 9:30. At 9:30, I will take questions, and I will do an hour of questions. And that way people have the option that, well, 9:30 comes, they go, well, you know what, my TV show's on, or well, I'd really like to get to bed now. And they can go off, and they know that they've not missed the meat of the webinar. All they've done is missed a little discussion, the questions. So they're not going to be too upset by that, if you know what I mean, but they will be if they miss the actual meet. So making sure you start and finish on time is common courtesy. So how do you start? Well, you can make sure that everyone can hear you. One way to do this is to just sort of ask people to put a yes into the box if they can hear you. In the question box, and just get lots of yeses from people. You may want to start talking about yourself, introduce yourself, maybe say hello to people and how are you, where is everybody today, and just read out some names and locations, because again it's going to make people feel special and like you're talking to them as individuals. So you get people to type their name and location into the question box, and again you say, there's Jack in Colorado, Johan in Germany, or whatever. You read a few out, and it's going to just sort of help break the ice and relax people and make them feel that little bit special. You want to introduce you. Who are you? Why are you there? Why are you speaking to them as an authority? What qualifies you to be an authority in this structure? If you are interviewing somebody, you may well introduce them and their qualifications and spend more time on them than yourself, because you can assume that they know a little bit about you. So spend 2 minutes just talking about the rules of the webinar. Tell them where the toilets are and the fire exits, that sort of thing. How are you going to handle questions? What's the duration going to be, and so on and so forth. So just set out the rules. Doesn't have to take a long time. Only need a couple of minutes on that, really. Then give them a little bit of background if it's appropriate. You may want to sort of tell them, well, I'm running this webinar because, and give them some information that lets them understand why it's being run and why it's important that they listen. Once you've done that, you're going to introduce the webinar. What are you going to tell them? Tell them what they're going to learn throughout the webinar. That's the next thing you need to do. So again, this is only going to be a few minutes, 5 minutes at the most. You're going to introduce the webinar, and often the background and the introduction sort of merge into one. It depends upon the subject and sort of how you're presenting it. Then you'd get into the main meat of the webinar. Now this may be half an hour, it may be an hour. It depends upon what you're trying to communicate to them. It's going to be as long as it needs to be long. So you then go into the main meat and you tell them the main content. Try not to get too distracted by questions and go off on tangents. If people ask questions, yay, that's all well and good, but do not allow yourself to get distracted. Take questions where it helps enhance the understanding of the content that you're trying to present. But it's important that your webinar flows logically. It's got to go from A, B, C, D, and so on. If you're going from A to E to F to Z to T to B, people are going to go, huh? So make sure it flows logically. It's just going to help people understand. Remember, this has to be as easy as possible. And by making it flow logically, you're going to build a good relationship. People are going to be happy with what they're seeing, and they're going to feel a lot better about the whole webinar thing. Now, unless your webinar is going to teach them from the ground up, you do have to assume a basic level of knowledge. You've got to assume that they know something. If I'm giving a presentation about how to create a niche blog site, for example, I may well assume that they know how to FTP. I'm not going to sit there and explain that in depth. I may assume that they know how to register a domain name. If you find you get a lot of questions from people saying, but I don't know how to do that, how do you do this? And it's not sort of part of the main content. What you can do is two things. You can either, if it's a large number of people, stop and cover it, or if it's a smaller percentage, you can say, well, look, it's not really in the scope of what we're doing, but if you go to, I'll send an email out to everyone later on with the replay of this. Go to the replay page and you'll find videos that train people to do that. And either record the videos yourself or use other videos that you have in your sort of collection, so that you don't want to distract people. There's nothing worse than being on a training program. I've been on these training programs. I've been on technical training programs, and you got people asking the noddiest of questions, the simplest of questions, and you're sitting there thinking, hang on, how do you not know how to do that? It's fundamental to doing it, but you are going to find people like that. So don't let them distract you, and sort of take it offline, if you like, and away from the webinar. As I said, if 90% of your audience knows how to FTP, don't spend half an hour teaching that 10%, because that 90% going to be bored. Once you've finished, you want to summarize the content. You may want to give them sort of a next steps, an action plan, something like that to get them going. You may want to sort of summarize it in such a way that you say, right, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and so on. If you're selling something, this is sort of where you would also put a call to action in. You'll have very subtly sold the product throughout the webinar, but towards the end, you will sort of be a bit more pushy and tell them, well, if you like this, you'll love my product, and something like that. You'll push them towards the product if you're selling something. You may well, as I said, allow for a question and answer session at the end, and again, that's going to help you to make sales, because people get, but basically people are giving you a chance to overcome their objections, which is invaluable. It really, really is. So, think about that. Have the question and answer session at the end, overcome their objections to buying, and then close with a further call to action and where to go next. And running your webinar like this is going to maximize the effectiveness for your listeners, and of course it's going to maximize the profitability for you. Having the calls to action, having the sort of chance to overcome their objections and then call to action again, it's going to maximize your sales. So, again, dealing with it like this is going to be professional, it's going to look good, people are going to be satisfied. The people who don't understand it, the 10% who don't understand the basics, they'll be pleased because you've addressed their needs by uploading these special training videos for them. The 90% who do know will be pleased because you haven't wasted their time explaining sort of the fundamentals. So, this is a great way of running them, and it's a structure that you can apply to any niche and any webinar, and you'll find it to be very, very effective for you. So that's how you structure your presentation. It's not too difficult, is it? You can do this. So let's move on now to the next video. You know how to structure your presentation, so let's get on and give you some more information about how you can really profit from these webinars. So let's talk a little now about how you market your webinar. So in order to make it worth your while in most cases, you need a good number of listeners. We're not talking tens of thousands, we're talking sort of a few hundred. But it depends on the type of webinar. If it's a web training course, it may well be sort of tens rather than hundreds. If it's a free webinar where you're selling something, you want the more the merrier, really. And quite often, the scarcity in line numbers will encourage people to sign up. If you've sent a mail out to 100,000 people about your webinar, and you say, well, there's only 1,000 places, you're going to get a rush of people who want to be there. So where do you market it to? Well, firstly, you can market it to your list. Your list is probably your first port of call. Now, some of you are not going to have a list, in which case, obviously, you can't market to your list. But a list is typically where most people would start marketing webinars. If you don't have a list, then you're going to have to joint venture with other people. So this is where it gets a little bit more complex, because if you're joint venturing with other people, you're going to have to obviously make sure that you can track their affiliate commissions or pay them per lead. Or, for example, if I was running a JV to promote a product launch and I got the product owner on there, I'd get him to or her to mail it to their list. So you're going to have to find a way to joint venture with other people, really, to get it out there. So this may require reciprocal arrangements, it may require affiliate links, or anything like that, really. It depends upon sort of how you are going to run it. So you've got to think about this and think about how it's going to work. So it's important to realise that, even if you've got a small list, you could still get a good number of people attending your webinar. So, market it to your list, joint venture with other people, pull in a few favours from other marketers, whatever it takes, really. What's a good idea before you run it is send out reminder links to attendees sort of 3 days beforehand, get to send out reminders a day beforehand and even an hour. Remind them a few times, but don't sort of hassle them every sort of 10 minutes saying, don't forget the seminar, the webinar, don't forget it, don't forget it. send out these reminder links. But these reminder links can be under the guise of useful information. So you're providing them maybe with something they got to do before they turn up, some studies, some information they got to have, what they need prepared, ready for your webinar. You may be giving them some information, some background knowledge on the webinar, and building it up to make sure that they attend. So these reminder emails serve sort of a few purposes, really. It helps to remind people about your webinar. It helps to remind them why they really need to attend it. So, make sure there's useful information rather than just a link that says, yeah, my webinar's tonight at 7 p.m, be there. Get some good information in there. It's going to help you make the sales. You can usually, with a free webinar, expect quite a lot of people not to attend. A lot of people, and we've probably all done it, is we see a webinar and we think, oh yeah, I really want to go to that. You sign it up, you forget about it, or you think, oh, I can't be bothered, or whatever it might be. So this is why you have to send out these reminder emails, because the reminder emails are motivating them to attend. A good set of reminder emails is going to get your attendance up. Now, if you have the budget, you could use pay-per-click and other paid advertising methods, Facebook or whatever it might be, to market your webinar. It really is up to you whether you do this or not. It's not necessary, but as I said, if you've got the money and you know you're going to get a return on investment, may well be worth pursuing. So let's talk about free webinars now. Free webinars are really, really good if you're building a list, or you want to establish your authority in the niche, or you are already an authority in the niche. Free webinars are great ways of building that authority up, because people will come along and listen thinking, who's this person? You then have a chance to present to them and show them that you are an authority, which of course is going to help you to make sales. So free webinars are very, very good. Now, if you are joint venturing with other people, or you've managed to get some promotions, free webinars can be used to build your list. Free webinars will have a higher attendance ratio. You'll have much more people wanting to attend simply because it's free, but conversely, a lot of people will not turn up because they think it's free, they haven't paid for it, so they think, oh, I can't be bothered, or I can't be, my TV show's on. A fair few of them are going to be tire kickers. You have to accept that, but don't worry about it, because you can give a good presentation, run it well, and it won't matter. People will still, buy at the end and subscribe to your list or whatever it might be. The important thing is to get them on the call, so you have a chance to persuade them. And of course, this can help you in future promotions. If you presented a good webinar, and then people are going to be more interested in the future to attend others, to spend money with you, and so on and so forth. Free webinars are a really, really good way for you to enhance your list relationships as well. You can run a webinar to your list just for free, just to give some information, and it's going to help you. Because of course your lists are going to go, oh wow, yeah, this is great, this is fantastic. And it's going to build a relationship, because they're building in their heads a relationship with you. They're hearing your voice, they're getting to talk to you through questions and answers, and it's going to help you really, make the most of it. So a good use of free webinars is to promote products or product launches. If there's a brand new product launch going on, I could run a free webinar on it, maybe even get the product owner in on it if I could. If I've got my own products, or I've got affiliate products I want to sell, there's nothing to stop me running webinars on those. Give some background information, give some information that sort of helps them do what the product says, and then point them in the direction of the product as the way to go. Paid webinars. Well, paid webinars are great, of course, because you're getting paid for it. You've got 100 people that paid you $50 a time, for example. You're going to love that, aren't you? So paid webinars are often very, very good. So they're a good way to earn. Now, one of the big benefits with them, or one of the big challenges, is you've got to sell it to people. Why would I, as your listener, want to turn up to it? So you've got to really make them go, yeah, I've got to attend. So paid ones tend to be, not just one-offs. They tend to be a series. So I might run a series of webinars on how to create your own graphics from Photoshop, for example. And then it's like attending college or an offline training course or something like that. So you have to sell the paid webinars, But what you will find is if somebody pays, they are likely to turn up. In 99% of the cases, they spent good money, they're going to be there. It's only in case of emergency or extreme apathy that you find that they don't actually turn up to the paid webinar. Now, with a paid webinar, it's always worth adding some bonuses to it. Encourage them to come in, add some advertised and unadvertised bonuses so that people turn up and you say, well, actually, I've arranged for you to have this, this, and this as well. And they're going to go, wow, yeah, great. And they're going to be really, in the mood and excited. Give something away, run a little competition on your webinar, something like that. All that is going to help get people interested. The replay is very, very important for a paid webinar. People will want to listen to it repeatedly. They may have listened to it the once and say, well, yeah, I've got most of it, but I want to listen to it again to really make sure I get it. Always over-deliver on paid webinars as well, just like with the product. Don't make it too salesy. If you're promoting other stuff as well, don't be salesy about it. Just casually mention it. People are paid to be there. They don't want to be sold to just because they paid money. They're going to get annoyed. So don't make it very salesy. Focus. As it's paid, then obviously you can recruit joint venture partners and affiliates and get them to promote your webinar and so increase the number of attendees. So that's a great way. Obviously they'll get a percentage of the webinar fees, but you would make that up from adding people to your list and so on. And of course, one of the important things if it's a paid webinar is have a back end lined up. If they've paid $100 for sort of a 9-week training course on Photoshop, have a back end. It may be advanced training courses, more webinars, it may be some other related products or consulting or whatever it might be. But get the back end sorted, because then you can further increase how much you're going to earn from your webinar attendees. So, these are the things you have to consider with your webinars. Is it going to be free or paid? And once you've decided that, get marketing it. Once you've got it marketed, you're going to have people ready to go, so it's time to start presenting it and to really blow their socks off with how good you are and how professional you are. And remember, how many sales you make from a webinar will be directly affected by how professional and informative your webinar has been. So now it's time to present your webinar. Well, you may be nervous speaking in front of people. Yes, you're still running a webinar, there's no one actually sat in front of you, but you may still be nervous. So you're going to have to overcome that. Now, you may want to sit there and imagine that you're talking to your best friend, or you're just chatting to a group of friends in a bar or something like that, whatever it takes. You may be nervous. Don't let it show too much. Just be calm, be relaxed, and you'll be fine. Just don't worry about it. Make sure that you're organized beforehand. Make sure you know what you're going to talk about, and so on. All of this is going to obviously help you to feel less nervous. If you've got your structure, you know what you're going to talk about, it's all organized in front of you and ready to go, then obviously that's going to be a lot easier for you, because you're not then going to be worrying throughout your webinar of, oh dear, where's my notes, what am I covering next? So get yourself organised, maybe even rehearse it a couple of times beforehand. One thing that I can recommend is get there sort of 5-10 minutes early, when the doors open basically, and spend the time meeting and greeting basically. Chat to people, talk to them, take a few questions, but obviously ones that aren't related to the content of the program. But sort of use it as an opportunity to sort of start building a relationship with the people on there, breaking the ice a little, if you know what I mean, just making it a little bit easier for them to get to know you and understand. Now, I personally would recommend rehearsing the webinar a few times beforehand. Yeah, you may feel like a bit of an idiot sitting there talking to yourself, but it's gonna do you an awful lot of good, particularly if you're nervous presenting your webinar. If you're nervous, the rehearsals will make a huge difference. It really will. So I strongly recommend that you rehearse this. The rehearsals are basically going to help you to just get over your nerves. It's going to help you to be more confident presenting it and make sure that the structure flows. Now, you may have a good structure on your computer, you know, written down. You may have a structure and think, yeah, that sounds really great. But then when it actually comes to running it and listening to it, you may go, well, actually, it doesn't make sense when I go through because I've missed something. So you know, rehearse it a few times to get the practice in, because then when you deliver it, it's going to feel very natural, it's going to feel very easy, and you're not going to struggle with it at all. Now, a lot of people in webinars will interview other people and they'll talk to experts. Now, if you're going to do that, make sure you have given them the questions beforehand and the structure, maybe even worked with them in order to get the webinar working well. You know, send them your proposed outline, get them to make sure that they're happy with it, maybe add to it if there's anything that they feel that, you know, can be added to it to make it any better. So they may come up with some ideas and say, well, you know, yeah, you've done well, but one of the things that's important for this is, you know, whatever it might be. So just make sure that you're open to being flexible and for your, the person you're interviewing helping you out. They will help you out in 99% of cases. Of course, it's going to help them. So they might have previous experience of running these sort of webinars. So just use them, as you can, but make sure they know what you're going to cover. Last thing you want is for an expert to turn up and sit and you go, right, we're going to cover this. Then they go, right, okay, no, I'm not prepared for that. They need time to prepare and get themselves ready beforehand just as much as you do. When it comes to presenting it, follow your structure. Don't be tempted to deviate. You know, if you've rehearsed it, you've practiced it, you've thought about it, you've got the structure right, don't be tempted to deviate and go off on a tangent, because you're going to end up winding people up. It's going to confuse someone if you're interviewing them, and so on. Define when you're going to take questions right at the beginning and literally only do them at that time. I found that it's usually best to leave questions and answers right to the end. It just avoids distractions. The last thing you want is to be stopping, every few minutes. You're delivering good content, and every few minutes you're stopping to answer some question. Now, if you see a question come up that's directly related to the content and will help in the greater understanding of it, by all means, answer it then and there. But if I'm busy talking about my niche blogs and how to set them up, and someone's asking questions about FTP or some such thing, you don't want to worry too much about that. So think about when you're going to ask questions, but don't let it distract you or your listeners from your webinar content. People have come to hear this content, and if they find you sort of dancing around and getting distracted and talking about all sorts of other things, they're going to get a bit annoyed and fed up, to be really truthful with you. When it comes to presenting it, don't sort of slouch down. Sit or stand straight and be relaxed. The reason being, when you sit and stand straight, your voice projects a lot better and you're going to be more confident. If you're slouching down and you're scrunched up at a funny angle, it's not going to help. It's going to sound a bit peculiar. People aren't going to really know quite what you're talking about. So, sit up straight, stand up straight, whatever it might be, and it's going to help you both with your confidence and ensuring that your voice is the best quality possible. If there are any technical problems, and one day it's going to happen, don't panic. Quite simple. Stay calm. Just tell people just to wait one moment while you contact technical support, or if your power goes out or your computer reboots or something like that. When you go back in, just sort of apologise and say, I'm very sorry, the power went out, I don't quite know why, but I'm back now. If it happens again and I disappear, don't panic, I'll be back as soon as I can. So, just be calm, deal with it in your stride, and don't get sort of frustrated and worried. The instant you start getting angry or acting unprofessionally, it's going to impact how people think of you, and it's going to impact the professionalism of your webinar. If there's a facility for listeners to talk back to you, make sure that they're all muted. The last thing you want is for you to say something and all these people suddenly start trying to talk. So, or if there is that facility, which in a lot of webinars there aren't, make sure that they are muted. Most of the time on webinars, the question facility is through a box that they enter. They type it in their browser basically. So there's no vocal abilities for them. Also have a definite end time in your mind. I think that's very important as well, and stick to it. Don't overrun too much. If you overrun by 5-10 minutes on the actual meet, not really a problem. As I said, one of the things I feel works very well is to do the presentation and then have your questions and answers, and that way the people who want to hear the meet, they've heard it, and then they can go if they want to, or they can stay to the questions and answers. And that way the questions and answers haven't sort of become mandatory for everyone to attend. So that works very, very well, I've found. So, you know, when it comes to presenting it, don't get stressed about it. Relax and have fun. It's not stressful. The idea behind it is that you enjoy it, it's a good time, you feel good about it, and that, you know, you enjoy it. The last thing you want to do is to make it really, really stressful, because of course what's going to happen then, it's going to put you off, it's going to impact how you deliver your webinars. So just relax and enjoy it. It's fun. You're going to have a great time talking to all these people and helping them to really become, you know, great at whatever it is you're teaching them, and hopefully you'll be making a good number of sales as well from it in whatever you're selling. So just be relaxed, be confident, be professional, and you won't have any problems at all with it. If you're really, really nervous about speaking sort of to an audience like this, then I would recommend you get some training in public speaking. Maybe go to somewhere like Toastmasters International, something like that. They are very inexpensive, but they are a fantastic way to learn public speaking so that you're confident in talking in front of an audience and delivering a webinar. There's groups of it in most areas. There'll be one hopefully within a commutable distance from you. So present your webinar, present it professionally, and you'll do fantastically. You're gonna have a good time with it. You really, really are. Webinars are a lot of fun and people get a lot from them. So let's move on now, and we're going to start talking about our next topic. So let's now talk about the content for your webinar. I think this is very, very important. What content are you going to put in there? How are you going to balance sort of sales and marketing versus delivering content? Well, whatever your content is, it has to pull people in. They need to know that the content you're giving them is valuable. So you are going to have to give away valuable information in your webinar. It's going to have to be something that they want to hear. So basically, it needs to be informative and educational. It needs to be something that's going to educate them in a niche, not just in why they need to buy from you and why you're an authority, but give them some valuable information in that particular niche. And what you wanted to do is answer the questions, i.e., what problems have they got? You want to start providing solutions to their problems, and that's what's going to get them on board. If they think that your seminar, your webinar is going to give them some great information to help them, I don't know, say become a better dog trainer, for example, then they are likely to turn up. They're going to want to come along because they're going to want to know even more what's going on. They're going to want to really get to grips with it. So make sure your content is educational, make sure that it's informative, make sure that it solves their problems and really excites them so that they think, yeah, I've really got to turn up, and make sure you deliver it, more importantly. Don't give away everything. I think this is quite important. A lot of people, when it comes to running sort of webinars like this, are tempted to sort of give away the barn, if you like. Yeah, they give away everything. Whereas, yes, you've got to give away some information, but if you're selling an info product and that's the whole purpose of the webinar, don't give them away everything that's in the webinar, because how's that going to work? It's not. Give them some of the information, a good amount of the information to sort of whet their appetite and answer some of their questions and problems, but not everything. Everything will be in the product that you are selling to them. If you give away too much, you've then got nothing to sell. You're not going to make any profits at all. Now, yes, I think it's important. It's quite important, I think, that you really do think about this balance of how much information do you give them versus what are you selling them. It's a difficult balance to get, I think, in many cases, but once you've got it, you're made, really. It's important to spend some time and think about that balance. If you give them sort of this much information, would they still want your product? That's the sort of question you have to answer. So you are trying to educate them, give them information, but you are also trying to make sure that they buy. You know, you've obviously got to put food on the table and pay electricity and so on. So, you know, you've got to earn from it. And getting this balance, I think, is where a lot of people fall over and a lot of people struggle. So sit and think about it. Remember, ask yourself the question, if I teach them all this, will they still want my product? Does that mean you've got to turn your product more into an advanced training course? I don't know, maybe you do. But one thing you can do with the content is understand your target market. What do they want to learn? What do they want to listen to? You know, survey them. Send out an email to your list advertising the webinar and get their input. Say to them, right, what do you want to hear in this? If you're interviewing a guru or an expert in a niche, say to them, what questions do you want me to ask this person? They will feed back. It encourages interaction. And of course, it's going to encourage them then to be a part of this whole webinar thing with you, because of course they've got a vested interest then, because they have, you know, contacted you and sort of given you some input for it. But I think it's important, and I do think this is where people fall down. You have to understand your target market and what they want. Yeah, if I'm delivering the content on something about making money, and my target market doesn't want to know that, they want to know how to build a business or build relationships with a list, it's not going to help. You have to understand what are the wants and needs of the people that are going to be listening, and you do have to really, really work on getting that right. It's very, very important. If you can understand that and make it so that it's interesting to them, you'll get people to come up. Now you've got to give them it in sort of bite-sized chunks, if you like. It's got to be easy to understand. Don't try and explain sort of everything and make it complex. Make it simple and easy to understand. My sort of philosophy is, if a 10-year-old can understand it, it's suitable for everyone. Unless I'm doing something that's specifically technical or aimed at a very, very specific market, I will keep everything very, very simple. Obviously, if I'm presenting something to sort of mathematics professors, I may not need to dumb it down quite as much. I don't want to make it too simple for them. So, I think you've got to really think about how you are going to present this and how it's going to be for people. So make sure you present it in a way which your target market can understand. When it comes to sort of the balance between sales and content, don't spend too much time selling to them. Sell subtly, casually mention the other product, tell them how good it is, and so on and so forth. But don't sit there and sort of constantly go, well, you've got to buy this product to find out more, you need to buy this product, etc., etc. Because people aren't going to do it. People are going to get annoyed. People don't like to... people don't like to be sold to. So sure, have a call to action right at the end. That's fine. That's not a problem at all. But do not sit and spend ages and ages trying to sell to them. Educate them as to why they need it and why it's going to help them. But do not spend all that time trying to sell. It's not going to work. It really, really isn't. So think about the balance of sales and information. Think about, if I was someone who'd come along to this webinar, would I be happy with this level of information or, this level of sales? If I paid for the webinar, how would I feel if I was sold to this much? Would I be annoyed with the level of selling? So you do have to think about your listeners and what they want. if you're going to set up a pitch fest, you are going to lose people. People have come for information. So if you are there constantly trying to sell, they're going to start leaving the webinar, basically. You're going to lose them, and you don't want to do that. So avoid a pitch fest. I mean, by all means, you can say to them up front, I've heard this on a few times, we're all adults here, I am selling you a product, but I'm going to show you how it all works up front, and then the product will give you even more information on how it's done. So, doing something like that, but you've got to get the balance right, because if you don't, you're not going to profit. You might make some money, but you're not going to make as much as perhaps you could. So it's very, very important for you to carefully think about this balance. Get this balance right, and you're going to see a good increase in your profits. So really, really think about it. But give them good content, balance the sales versus content, and your webinar is going to go great. It's going to go fantastically, and people will love it. And once you've done one, you can do many, many more, and people will love the webinars. Webinars are fantastic. And I think what you'll find is once you run one or two, you'll realise what a great source of communication with an audience they are, and the sheer potential available for you from them. So really, really spend some time thinking about the content, and make sure the content is really top-notch. Top-notch content is going to help you to make more sales. So let's give you some tips now to sort of help you make the most from your webinar. Well, webinars are useful for a number of different things, really. They're great if you're going to do some product launches, or you're promoting affiliate products, and so on and so forth. They're really, really useful for that. They're a great way of sort of educating people pretty much as to why they need the product. So if you're planning on sort of dominating a physical launch or something like that, then by all means, consider a webinar. It could do you an awful lot of good. Now, one way of doing this is to get the person who created the product to come in on the webinar and answer questions and or teach. This works very, very effectively. People don't mind. Product creators are always looking for ways to promote their products, and let's face it, if you're going to make the time and effort to create a webinar, they're going to be more than happy to turn up to promote their product. You might struggle a little with super gurus, but most people will be more than happy to help out and come along and join in, because of course they're going to profit from it as well, because they're going to make the sales. You're doing all the work, they turn up, talk for a little while about how great they are, and voila, they get money in their pocket. So no one in their right mind, to be perfectly frank with you, is going to turn that down. So it's a very, very good technique, and as I said, most people will be more than happy to come and turn up and give you information and help. They will usually as well help you with determining what questions to answer, how to run it, and so on. They'll help you with the content side of it. Don't expect them to do it all for you, but they will often help. And what you can usually find is they will often promote it by emailing their list as well. So you can often find that they will send your webinar details out to their list, which of course is going to be great for you. It's going to help you get more people on the webinar yourself. This method with webinars is actually very, very, very effective. It's a great way, particularly if you're not really a known name. If you're not someone that everyone goes, oh god, yeah, that person is an expert in the niche. Something like this is a great way of getting your name known. Basically, it really, really is. I can strongly recommend that you do this. It's very effective, and it's going to help you make more sales and obviously profit more, which of course is not a bad thing. You can then sort of run it with the experts, and it's going to build your name and list. If somebody is running a seminar with a big name guru, people are going to start instantly associating you with that person. In their mind, if I'm interviewing somebody big in internet marketing, I think one of the super gurus, if I'm interviewing one of them, of course everyone that listens to the interview is going to be, very impressed and think that I'm on a par with that person. So of course, it's going to help your reputation absolutely no end at all. But if you're going to do this, you need to make sure that you have a relevant and interesting webinar planned. You've got to make sure you've got good quality information. You've got to make sure that it's something that is going to interest people. There's no good you running a webinar and it ends up being boring and tedious because people just aren't going to want to turn up. So, make sure it's interesting, make sure it's exciting, make sure it's something that the people really want to hear, that they sit there and go, oh man, this is fantastic, I can't believe they're sharing all this information with us. That sort of effect is going to really, really make your webinar so much easier to sell. Now, particularly if you're interviewing somebody, what you need to do is think about, well, if I was listening to this person, what questions would I have for them? And that's going to help you determine really how to run your webinar. Think about that. I mean, one thing you can do that, as I said, is highly effective, is ask your list or the people that you're attending to give you questions to ask these people. That's going to work. It's going to work very, very well. Because, of course, they're going to be really excited at a chance to, put their name on something, if you like. They've got an opportunity to participate and effectively ask a question of some sort of, what's considered a big name person in the niche. So it's a very, very good way of doing it. And what I found is people really, really appreciate it. They very, very much like it. So, just get in the mindset of your listeners and understand what do they want to know and ask those sort of questions. It's going to help you significantly as well in selling it, because of course, if you can say, well, one of the sales points could be it's the sort of question you would ask this person, it's going to help them a lot. Now remember, it's just common courtesy when you're doing something like this to make sure that the person you're interviewing has a list of questions beforehand. You don't want to surprise them. They want time to prepare so that they look nice and professional as well. They don't want to turn up and be sort of going, well, I don't really know because I haven't really had a chance to think about that. You want them to be able to be very, very professional. And it works both ways because, of course, if you are, acting like this with them and you're giving them that, then they're going to be much more, shall we say, helpful towards you. Whereas if they feel that you're, going to do them over with some surprise questions, then you're going to likely find that they're not going to be so helpful towards you. So, it's building your reputation as someone who's great to do webinars with. Because, of course, you get one of them to do a webinar, and then, you think, well, great, I want to do one with another big name person. These people talk amongst each other, and what you'll find is that they may sort of say, well, I did a webinar with this, so and so's invited me to do a webinar. What's he like? Is he any good? Should I be doing a webinar with him? And if big guru number 2 has done a webinar with you, and he turns around and goes, oh yeah, he was great. He gave me this great list of questions. He built a big attendees. We made loads of money. It was fantastic fun. That sort of thing is going to sort of encourage other people. So, you've got to be professional, not just for your people that are listening to your webinar, but to anyone that you've invited in as sort of a guest speaker on it. Now, when it comes to running the webinar, I think this is quite important, is just make sure that everything's working beforehand. Get in there a bit early. It's like if I'm running a seminar, a live seminar, I would always turn up early. Go and have a look, make sure the projector's working, make sure the coffee's laid on, that sort of thing. And that's pretty much what you're doing with this. Is you turn up a bit early, just make sure everything's working, make sure your computer's working, make sure there's enough electricity in the house, make sure you've got a glass of water near you, whatever you need to keep going. You don't want to have to stop halfway through and go, look, really sorry guys, talk amongst yourself, I've got to run to the toilet. Make sure everything's done beforehand. You are potentially going to be sitting there for a couple of hours, so you don't want to have to sort of run off halfway through and let them talk amongst themselves. So just make sure everything's working, make sure the webinar company's up, make sure they're all set, make sure they're all ready for you, and so on and so forth. I am personally slightly paranoid with all this stuff, so I recommend testing everything twice. And the reason being is you're absolutely sure then, you know it's going to work. So just test it and test it again just to be thoroughly convinced. Now, unless you have a super large list, you are going to struggle to get enough people to attend. You may have a very responsive small list, in which case, great, good for you. But you may not. You may not have a list at all. So what you may want to consider is joint venturing with other marketers in order to gain some listeners. But again, if you're doing something like this, you are going to have to make it worth the while. People aren't going to, in general, send out webinar invitations out of the goodness of their heart. Typically, they want something back, and usually it's money. But you need to have some sort of arrangement in place. There's got to be something in there for them. Otherwise, why are they going to help you? If I'm Super Guru A with 200,000 people on my list, why would I send your message out? What's in it for me? So make sure there is something in it for them, and I think that worked very, very well. But I think if you can ensure that you run a professional webinar, it's going to really, really help you. Professional webinars are going to look good, and it's just going to make you look good, and it's going to help you make sales. If it's a very amateurish one with lots of problems and ummings and ahhings and pauses because you're not prepared, it's going to look bad. End of story. It really, really is. So you've got to stop and really, really think about it. You really, really do. So when it comes again to your webinar, make sure you avoid all the background noises as well. Don't have dogs barking, children screaming, etc., etc., because it's going to detract from the webinar and stop people hearing you properly. The excessive background noises detract from the professionality, and people aren't going to be happy with it. They really, really aren't. So, like with recording a video, don't have all the noises in the background. Try and schedule at a time when you know it's going to be quiet. Arrange for people to be out of the house if you need to. Inform them that it's all going to be, you've got to be quiet if you're running a webinar. Lock yourself in a room somewhere and off you go. Now, obviously, you haven't got control over your neighbours, but just try whatever you can do to minimise background noises. The higher the quality of the webinar in sort of professionalism, presentation and content, then the more successful it will going to be, plain and simple. So you are in control of the quality of your webinar, and it's up to you to ensure that it is the best possible webinar ever, and that way you are going to maximize your effectiveness. So switch off your mobile phone when you're running it, unplug your landline, turn your speakers down on your computer. Just make sure there's nothing that's going to distract people. Get your schedule together, your structure for it, and really go for it and deliver the best quality webinar you can. And that way you're going to maximize your income from the webinar itself. You're going to do very well with it. Okay, so let's talk now a little bit about how you can take your webinars and either turn them into products or create products from them. Slightly different concepts, but I think very important for you to fully understand them. Now, you can take a webinar that you're running and turn it into a product. That is quite acceptable as something to do. So, a webinar can become a product for you if you want it to. So, it could become something that you're going to give away as a list builder. It could be something that you're going to use as a bonus to another product, or it could be a complete product itself. In fact, the webinar may end up actually being the product. So that's entirely plausible for it to happen that way. So your product could be a set of webinars. It's effectively an online training course. It's like me going to night school to learn how to juggle. I could do it on a series of webinars, for example. So huge potential here. There really, really is. So webinars are a great way of delivering content. If you think about it, if I want to run the seminar offline, it's it's terrible trouble. I've got to make sure that there's enough people in the area I'm running it for them to want to come along. You know, I can't run a webinar in the area where I live, because I live in a village with 650 houses. There's not enough people in this village to fill a webinar on internet marketing. But I'd have to go and run it in a big city where there's plenty of people can get to it easily, and so on and so forth. So, you know, webinars are a great way of appealing to a huge audience. Instead of me having to, you know, hire a room, pay for all that, which is quite expensive, then obviously, you know, advertise, get people in, and have people have to travel all the way to my seminar. I could do a webinar, people can do it from the comfort of their home at a time that's convenient for them. So webinars are very, very, very effective. If you want to build on it by adding some extra videos and books, then you can create a really, really great product. You really, really can. Combine sort of webinars and videos and books, and you have pretty much what I consider a perfect product. It really, really is. It's very high quality, very interesting, very useful to people. It really, really is. You know, because what you can do is you can use the videos and the books to build on the information in the webinars, and it's perfectly acceptable. Great way of doing it. Now, if you are creating a product from webinars, you're going to have an overall structure. So if I'm running a series of 6 webinars on the subject, I'm going to have to make sure that the set of webinars, you know, flows logically and makes sense. It's going to have to make sure that, you know, it flows through and people can follow it. I don't want it to be a case of people turn up to the webinar and they don't really follow it. You've got to make sure that it's got that structure all the way through. You know, so outline the content in your webinar series. You're going to have to do this anyway, because you're going to have to sell it. So people need to know what's going to happen throughout the webinar in order for you to actually sell it to them. But you're going to have to be flexible with the whole webinar thing, because you know, after the first week you may realise that, well, actually people didn't understand this, or you may think, well, you know, we had a lot of questions about this subject, so let's add this into later webinars. So you're going to have to think about that, be flexible, and adapt your structure and your webinar series according to the needs of your listeners. You may even end up adding an extra webinar in to address issues you hadn't thought of, which is fair enough. And all that would be is an unadvertised bonus or something similar to that. I would recommend that you provide recordings of the webinar, particularly if it's a training series, so that they can listen to it offline. Not everyone can turn up, and that would put people off. But if you advertise the fact that, you know, the recordings of the webinars will be available, people who say, well, I can't make that time of night or that time of day for a webinar, are more likely to buy, because they're going to realise that, well, it doesn't matter if I can't actually make the webinar, I can, you know, listen to it later. And you can even say that if you have questions and you can't attend the webinar, email you the questions and take it from there. So lots of potential. One thing you can do again, you know, with this whole webinar product, is use books and videos to sort of build on the information and get everyone up to speed, basically. So, you know, you can have in the sort of, say, in the members area, a set of basics training information, and say to everyone, this is the stuff you need to know before you start the webinar. Here's the training materials. And that way, when you start the webinars, you're not going to be sitting there and having to explain to people, you know, how to upload a web page or, you know, use a browser. So having that sort of basic level of information there is going to help get people all to the same level. But this is this sort of series is a great way of running a high value product. I mean, people love training courses, and webinars like this sort of series of training is going to be high value for a lot of people. It's really, really going to help them to get a lot from it, basically. So, you know, as I said, webinars can be products, or webinars can become products. So it's entirely up to you how you're going to run it, but certainly consider it. Think about sort of the ways that you're going to use the webinar. Always get the recording of the webinar. You never ever know when you're going to come up with that sort of one gem of information that changes people's lives or makes your reputation. So always record your webinars and keep the recordings. And whether you use them as products or use them as bonuses or whatever, that is up to you entirely. But make sure you record them all. But webinars are very good products and can be very good products at the same time. So we've gone through a lot of information in this program, and I'm hoping you got a really good understanding of webinars are, what they are, how they work, and so on and so forth. So webinars are basically online training seminars. They've pretty much replaced telephone conferences as the best way of live communication with a group of people. They're much more interactive. They allow people to ask questions, for you to take polls, for you to show video to people. And in a telephone conference, you may in the past you'd have sent out a PowerPoint, and you had to constantly say, right, we're on to the next slide, and people would be saying, sorry, which slide are we on? I don't know where we are. With a webinar, they're looking at videos, a video of your screen so they can see what you can see, so you know that they're all on the right page of the presentation, and you can lead them through where you want them to go. It's a very, very popular form of training, and one that I can very, very highly recommend you using and being a part of. It's very, very good. Webinars, you can either give free webinars to promote products or build expertise or build a list, or you can do paid webinars. Paid webinars are much more, obviously, you're training, people are paid to come to the webinar or series of webinars. Which one you do, it's up to you. It depends upon what your objective in business is. Now, a webinar can be a product. Rather than someone saying, well, I'm paying $50 to attend this webinar, the product could be a series of webinars. And then once you run the webinars, the product is simply the recording. So, you've got plenty of options there, really. Webinars can be run to either promote your own products or products as an affiliate. Again, depends upon your objective in business and what you're trying to achieve as to what you would do. But really, for it to be profitable for you, you're going to have a good number of listeners. You're going to have a number of people on there. Running a webinar for 5 or 6 people, unless they're paying you for it, isn't really going to be massively profitable. So you've got to make sure that you get a good number of people in there. So what's your next steps? Right, now, to go on from this here, now, you need to decide on a topic to run a webinar. What subjects are you going to run a webinar on? And it doesn't have to be internet marketing related. It could be anything, any topic at all. Absolutely anything you want. These techniques and this works in any niche. I could run a webinar on rose gardening, keeping hamsters, internet marketing. I could write it on creating blog sites, building a relationship with a list, stargazing, anything. Webinars can be on absolutely anything at all. Once you've done that, you need to outline it. So what I recommend is write down the main points you're going to cover. I'm pretty much like chapter headings in the book, and then just write down the sort of main points in each chapter, and that's your outline for your webinar. And you're going to use that to sell your webinar, and you're going to use it to talk about the subject. Determine if your webinar is going to be free or paid, and what you're going to be promoting as well. So think about that. Is it going to be free and I'm going to be promoting this product? Is it going to be paid and I'm not going to sell them anything? Determine how it's going to work. Set up the webinar with a webinar company and then start promoting it. Start promoting it, getting people through the door and signing up. You want them as many people as you can. Then remind your attendees about the webinar. Remind them a few times, but when you remind them, don't just say, "Oh, it's my webinar." Give them some valuable information and more reasons to attend. By the time you finish reminding them, you want them to be, rabidly interested in attending your webinar because, frankly, they couldn't survive without it. You want them that interested in it. Make sure your webinars run professionally. Follow the tips that we've given you. Make sure that it's well ordered, well structured, it all works. Make sure that you're in a good area, it's quiet, there's no background noises. One word of advice. And I forgot to mention this earlier, so this is quite important. If you're doing anything that involves a browser, what I will recommend you, if you're running your webinar and you're showing them your browser and your screen like that, create a new account, a brand new account on your computer, and go into there to do it. You don't want people to see your browsing history. You know, if I go to Firefox and I start typing a domain name, it comes up with domains that I visited. I don't want people to see that information. I don't want to see user IDs or anything like that. So, you know, if you use Windows, it's very, very simple. You just create a new user profile and you use that one for your webinars. You know, once you've done it, you run your webinar, you can delete the profile and all the information's gone. And that way you've got a completely clean install. People aren't going to see everything on your desktop. They're not going to see stuff you've been browsing through. So, yeah, that adds to the professionalism. And of course, once you've done it, reap the benefits, as many of them. And then just keep repeating it. You know, you can either run the same webinar a few times or run different webinars or set up a series. But, yeah, whatever you choose to do, yeah, just do it. Just take action, make it happen. Webinars are seriously popular, and you can use these to really make some very good money, and you can get a lot of people signed up to them, and people love them. People love webinars at the moment. I'm sure you've attended some yourself. So, you know, you have all the information now. Here's a step-by-step action plan on what you need to do. So off you go and take the action and make it happen. You can do this, and you can profit from webinars. Whether you profit financially or from establishing yourself as an expert in a niche is up to you. It depends upon your business objective. However, you can do it. Webinars don't require any special skills or knowledge, and you have all the knowledge you need now. So, start running your webinars and start profiting from them. There's a world of opportunity out there just waiting for you to grasp it.